same as that of this presentation. Governance of government middle schools in Beijing and Delhi, supporting accountability, incentives and capacity. Now, as you know, in Delhi, the Delhi government is claiming to really revolutionized school education, and and Beijing anyway we thought was quite ahead in these things. So it will be a good comparison, interesting comparison. And Miss Yan Yifei was here a couple of years back, right? 2 years back, where she had the preliminary findings, and today I remember, I think she was told to come back again, with the final findings. So we will hear, what she has come out with. And now that the thesis is submitted, is final. So we look forward to your presentation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Srimati ma'am. So basically, as you see, today's presentation is really about the governance of government middle schools, which is a comparison about the supportive accountability, which is in-service training and the career advancement that I'm specifically referring to. And I see how it is related to the teachers' incentives and also how it enhances their capacities. So this is the plan of today's presentation. So before that, maybe a little bit of introduction about my research. So I have 3 core research areas: governance and accountability, education and development, and also China and India, which is the reason why I'm here. So I have the privilege of combining all these 3 of my research interests in my dissertation, which is the thing that you're about to hear now. Broadly, I am motivated by two aspects. So the first of all is how can education governance and accountability be better understood in theory and ultimately practiced in reality? And then to the extent that understanding supportive accountability is important, how are they practiced in 2 of the world's largest basic education system, which is India and China? And more specifically, this project answers 2 research questions. So how is supportive accountability being practiced in the government middle schools here in Beijing and Delhi? And also, what leads to their success and hinders their performance from the perspective of teachers? It is important to explore the perspective of teachers because they are directly the recipients of this kind of support. So here is a little bit theoretical background. I may not delve into the very in-depth of it, but maybe just to start, where this project started from is through an extensive literature survey, we found that the concept of accountability is not very viewed very comprehensively. So basically, the literature doesn't have an overarching definition of what accountability is. It's just used very loosely in the articles, either in the title part or in the text part, and sometimes the word is kind of taken for granted. But what is really covered in the literature is just in terms of individual mechanisms, very discrete mechanisms. So we were arguing in this project that actually a comprehensive framework that views these mechanisms in totality is indeed needed. And also one of the very biggest problem of the existing works is that it either relegates the role of the government to the very margins, such as say the decentralization that gives the power and autonomy to the local government. So there's nothing to do with the central government. Versus say privatization. So the role is given to the market. The government is not involved either. And also the importance of the local context, because to the extent that the government is involved in some of the accountability mechanisms, its role is very narrowly understood as command and control. So it's very top-down, discipline, punishment, these kind of things. And a lot of the times, the kind of assumptions about the local actors is just devoid of context. So it's very irrelevant to what is actually happening on the ground. So that's why we want to have a very more comprehensive understanding on what accountability is. So in our comprehensive framework, first of all, there is this ground level interactions that is mapped out very clearly in both sense of what kind of information is given from one party to the other, and also what kind of feedback action is given back. And also, it is important to realize here that the feedback actions actually include both kind of punishment, discipline, and the support and the reward, which is equally important for the accountability relationship to work out. And the other contribution of the serialization is that the government is put in the center rather than the previous version. Government is like either outside or above the system. But government here is put in the center, but its role is more visualized in terms of a stewardship, which has two layers of meanings. So first of all, it aligns the different goals of different stakeholders towards the improvement of student learning. And then secondly, it also needs to ensure that the different kind of stakeholders both have the incentive and the capacity to work towards realizing that goal, right? So that's why both the kind of sanctions, the penalty for inactions, and the kind of training and the various kind of support are needed in order for this comprehensive system to work out. So that's why. So that's the rationales of focusing on accountability and also supportive accountability. And some additional reasons of focusing on in-service training and career advancement in specific is that it's a kind of complementary organizational tools to other kind of supportive measures. So in the literature, the most common supportive measures as an accountability mechanism examined in the literature is very short-term or even one-shot kind of measures. The most prominent example is the performance pay. The performance measured by student outcomes, and then you have the one-time point of bonus or like that. So that's why I argue in this dissertation that the more institutionalized and regularized kind of support, such as in-service training and career advancement, needs to be scrutinized further as an accountability mechanisms also. And also the other support that I gained from the literature is the consensus that as compared to teacher degrees, years of experience, this kind of measurable or quantifiable aspects, the teachers' quality and also the support teachers give in order to improve their quality is really the very critical link of the delivery of the performance, but very inadequately focused. And I think since we are presenting this Institute of Chinese Studies that has a lot of comparative angles, maybe I don't have to justify a lot. But here, one point that I want to make is that both in India and China, these are the two countries that the national level policies or very high level de jure policies can be very different from the de facto manifestations on the ground. So that's why, instead of having a very macro understanding, I really want to understand, what is the ground level realities of these two supportive accountability mechanisms that I study. And also, to the extent, as I said, these two are really the largest basic education systems in the world. So that's why I'm also hoping that lessons learned from these two countries can also be used for other developing country contexts facing similar challenges and issues. And the reason to focus on Beijing and Delhi as starting points is that because it's more like an exploratory study of accountability mechanisms. So that's why it makes sense to study the two capital cities where the information and the resources are relatively more available, right? And as you will see in the next slides, the governance structure of basic education is more or less comparable in these two cities as compared to other areas in these two countries. And the final point, justification that I want to make is that Beijing and Delhi are actually very suitable to study the governance perspective, because governance is essentially about how this kind of various kind of fiscal, financial, and human resources are utilized and managed. So in Beijing and Delhi, resources are quite adequate or abundant, let's say. And also, the government also has a lot of commitments to basic education. So, for example, in Delhi, more than 20% of the budget is devoted to basic education. and Beijing also has a similar kind of devotions to that. So this makes these two capital cities more comparable as compared to the least advanced regions in China and India. For them, like maybe in securing the input is still the more topmost priority. I mean, even though the governance is equally important, right? So here is the system of the governance system of Beijing and Delhi. So mainly Delhi is a little bit more complicated in the sense that the administrative function and academic function, the program function are like three different parts. But at least there's one simplification in the system of Delhi is that when I interview the government officials and the district level officers, so they see that at least the SSA and RMSA, like in terms of finance, in terms of program, is not a very prominent say in Delhi as compared to in other states which suffers like more financial constraint. So that kind of simplifies the structure a little bit. And then the government, what we are talking about when we are talking about the government middle schools. So basically, in Beijing you have the pure middle schools, 全中学, and comprehensive schools, 完中, and in Delhi you have the upper primary and senior secondary. So these are the, And due to the constraints of dissertation, so I was able to only search for one district each. So the reason for choosing North Delhi and Fengtai is mainly following a logic of exclusion, meaning that certain districts in the two cities are too incomparable to be included into the criteria. So on one hand, for example, in Beijing you have this Haidian district, which has the highest concentration of universities not only in Beijing but also all over China, I guess. So one specific type of middle schools they have is the university affiliated school. So in that sense, not only do they get resources from the Department of Education, but they also enjoy extra resources from the university itself. And that doesn't happen anywhere in Delhi, right? And versus in Delhi, you have this northeast district, which is very densely populated and have a lot of religious conflict or tensions at least. So this kind of scenario is unseen in Beijing also. So after excluding this uncomparable district, I was left out North Delhi and Fengtai as maybe the relatively average performing district, which is more suitable for the purpose of exploratory studies that I conduct here. So as I mentioned, the fieldwork was done in 2016, 17, and so basically in North Delhi there are 33 schools, so I interviewed 150 teachers, and in Fengtai there are actually 24 schools, where I was able to get in touch with 22 of them and had 80 teachers. So the reason why the number of teachers are substantially lower in Beijing is that, so the questionnaires delivered to teachers are divided as such. So because I was studying in-service training and career advancement, so I would the implicit assumption is that the different levels according to the years of experience, different levels of teachers may have different needs of training and different perception of training, from career development, etc. So that's why I ask each and every school to give me one teacher that is a newly joined, maybe just to have 1 to 3 years of experience, a middle career teacher, 4 to 10 years of experience, and then 11 plus, and then a high school teacher as a reference. But the unique thing about Delhi is that Delhi, in addition to the regular teachers, given the teacher shortage actually not only in Delhi but all over India, there's also the practice of guest teachers. So I also want to understand how the training and the career advancement of guest teachers and what their perceptions are. So that's why I included the guest teachers also, and also given more numbers of schools, so hence the number. The main research tool is a teacher survey and also the follow-up interviews. So basically, on one hand, I have the detailed questions about the organizers of the training, the durations of the training, what is the training, the content, so as more an independent variable. And also on the other hand, I have their satisfaction levels, measured 1 to 5. And if they're satisfied, I follow up like what are the reasons of satisfaction. If they're dissatisfied, what are the reasons of dissatisfaction. And similar questions are asked about the promotion and awards as a career announcement. And before that, I did several expert consultations, and I also interviewed several government officials. And in Delhi, particularly, there's also the supplementary principal surveys to see, like, to triangulate what are the principals' perceptions, and I also surveyed a little bit of the policy documents on both sides. Here is some pictures taken from the fieldwork. This is relatively in good shape, and I think this school is like also selected as one of the 45 pilot schools or something like that. So there might be a chance that the infrastructure is improved, I don't know, substantially in these schools. But 2 years back when I went there, it's just so these are the situations in front of the schools. And here on the walls you have this Swash Bharat Clean India like mantra painted on the wall. Yeah, and so this is from the premise.
These are not Delhi schools.
I believe this is in Mokonpur, like which is like farther, and then Buradi is more or less like in similar conditions also. And this is the school in Chandni Chowk, because Chandni Chowk is like a super crowded area. So the school there is just like you have to cross all the stairs, and it's on the second level.
It's a middle school there.
It's a middle school there. Yeah, I guess that's the only school in Chandni Chowk area that I have on my list. But otherwise, you also have this relatively advanced, for example, the RPBB that I followed up today. It's in a like quite middle class area, and the infrastructure is substantially. So these are typical government middle school in Beijing. So the comparison that I did is like two steps. First, there are some kind of cross-case differences. Here are just some sample characteristics. I think there's no substantial difference that I want to mention. Actually, the highest degree here for respondents in Delhi might be even higher, like 80% of them have a master's degree. But I guess that's also because the requirement of, say, being a TGT, being a PGT, for example, in Beijing, most of them are bachelor's degree. Although I think that the government has the plan of degree upgrade, meaning that within the 5 years you complete some kind of the master's level course to make the teachers a master degree holder. But the real substantial difference is really the teaching mode. So in Delhi, I guess also because of the teacher shortage, so mainly they're teaching multi-subject, multi-grade, and also multi-sections. But in Beijing, most of the teachers are just teaching a single subject, a single degree, and they barely teach more than 2 sections. So that's why you see the average weekly teaching hours is substantially higher for the respondents in Delhi, right? And even though the administrative matters that they spend is more or less the same, and also in terms of lesson preparation. I guess the first interesting difference that I observed in terms of the teachers' in-service training is you see that in Beijing the training is almost universalized, whereas in Delhi 67% of teachers answered that they have received certain types of training during that period. Mainly the difference has 2 sources. First is that the guest teachers and also the newly joined teachers, a lot of them were not able to catch up with the trainings. And the other thing is actually related to the the training format. Whereas in Beijing, it's kind of dispersed into the semesters on a weekly basis. So for example, if I teach English, then it's very possible that on Friday, every Friday, 2 to 3 p.m., so it's the training period of all the English teachers within the school, right? Versus on the other hand, maybe every Friday 2 to 3, I will go to the district to receive the trainings given to me by the district. So these are the training formats for teachers in Beijing. Versus as in Delhi, the trainings are mostly provided by the state level authorities, the SERT, and it's usually concentrated during the summer breaks. Meaning that if for whatever reasons that I missed the training this time, the next training that I can receive is like next year, next summer break, right? And also, one of the propositions that I have for the dissertation is like for trainings or for supportive accountabilities to be effective, you really have to cater to the needs and incentives of the respondents. So that's why we see that actually neither Beijing and Delhi has a very great record of like consulting the teachers about their needs before the training. But still, like the percentage of teachers consulted in Beijing is still 3 times more than the teachers consulted in Delhi. So that's why it's not surprising that most of the teachers in Delhi doesn't find that the training that they actually receive matches the preferred like training orders or priorities. And in Beijing, the number is like relatively lower. It's like 50% of the teachers. And there's also substantial difference in terms of satisfaction scores. So yeah, here is just a visualization of the providers. So you see like this is the mentioning of the training providers as accumulated from their questionnaires. So basically in Beijing, the trainings are concentrated at my own school and also the district level and below, whereas in Delhi, the training is very concentrated at the state level education authorities. So then maybe briefly mention so you see the satisfaction scores line. So maybe I also followed up with their top 3 major reasons of dissatisfaction. So basically in Delhi, the respondents are dissatisfied that actually the frequency of the training is too low and then also the duration is too short, which is given that it's only like during a summer break and just like maybe 3 or 4 days like that. And they also complain that the quality is too low in the sense that like the resource person is usually from the universities who are devoid of the actual on-the-ground problems that is happening in the schools. And the other reason is that like sometimes the content doesn't match their expectations either. And also the trainings that they receive, even if they find it good, they are not able to utilize the lessons learned from trainings into their actual practices of teaching. So in Beijing, I think the problem about duration and about quality is like fewer, but the most frequently mentioned reasons of dissatisfaction in Beijing is also that even they feel that the quality of the training is very good, but there are still some gaps in applying what they learned in the training into the actual classroom practices. So then move on to the career advancement. So I surveyed the respondents. So basically 50% of the respondents in Beijing has been promoted, received a promotion ever since their career, and 43% of respondents in Beijing, in Delhi received the career promotion. But you can see that the intervals of last promotion versus the time of filling in the survey is much longer for the respondents in Delhi as compared to Beijing. And that has to do with promotion type. So basically in Delhi, the career path is what I call the vertical promotion, whereas in Beijing it's more the like horizontal path. So what do I mean by that? So this is the system in Delhi. So promotion for, so first of all, the promotion is only available for regular teachers. So that's why a lot of the grievances for the guest teachers is that they are not included in the like career system. So for regular teachers, promotion means that you are promoted from teaching primary schools to teaching secondary schools and then to teaching higher secondary schools. And then like you have the chance to become vice principals of the teachers' trainers. So what is the pitfall of this system? So imagine like you have been teaching your TGT of chemistry for 10 years. So not only do you have the subject knowledge, but you're also dealing with a particular ages of kids, like for like the 10-day kids. So while you are moved to like TGT of either chemistry, and sometimes there's even a case like there will be like TGTs of interdisciplinary, meaning that I'm a TGT of chemistry, but even that for the TGT, it is required that you have a master degrees, right? And somehow it's easier to get, let's say, English master degree like from correspondence course. So that's why it's even possible for TGT chemistry to become a PGT in English. So just imagine like not only will his 10 years of experience dissipated in the system, but he as like new teachers in the new subject, he will be required to attend the training in together with other PGTs of English who has taught the subject for maybe 10 years already. So that's why you see like a lot of the expertise are like wasted in the system. Because the teachers are treated implicitly as a burden of the system of the training, rather than an asset that the government can incorporate into their training systems and career advancement, etc. So this is the horizontal career development path in Beijing, which means that for each and every stage of schools, the career advancement means that you are like level 3 teachers for primary school to level 2 to level 1. So it's like an independent expertise, you see. And the other thing that I didn't got map up in this model is that in addition to the teacher and also in between the teacher and the vice principal like positions, there are very rich layers of intermediate leadership positions. So for example, if I'm an excellent teacher, and before I become the vice principal for academic affairs, I would have the chance to become, let's say, the English study group head, like a 教研组长 before that. So in that case, I was in charge of the in-service training of the teachers of my particular subject, right? Or versus if I'm a teacher like capable of administrative affairs. Before I become the vice principal of in charge of academic affairs, I will be having the chance to be the group head, like a 年级组长, which is in charge of the administrative affairs of the particular class or the grade. So that's why with this kind of intermediate positions, the system is like more nuanced and it makes also more natural transitions as in between the different stages. So that's why I also surveyed the perception of a promotion system for teachers in Delhi and for teachers in Beijing also. And as you can see, the satisfaction of teachers in Beijing about the system in Delhi about the system is mostly that the transparency of the criteria is quite good, and also like very few teachers feel optimistic about their next promotion is going to happen soon. And also very few feel that their promotion actually rewards the professional excellence or teaching excellence. But versus actually you see that a lot of the dissatisfaction is really about the time to get promoted is too long, and also the promotion rewards other kind of like, say for example, seniority rather than like teaching excellence. And also, like you see, the opposite of the optimism about next promotion is that 80% of the teachers, mostly are the guest teachers, they are very pessimistic about their prospects because they are not really included in the career advancement system here. And so the interesting is that the thing is that when you compare it with the perception of teachers in Beijing, right? So 32% of the teachers feel that they're satisfied with the system because the promotion actually rewards their teaching excellence. And some of them also feel that the promotion criteria are transparent and the time to get promoted is reasonable, etc. But you see that's actually one of the reasons for dissatisfaction. Like some teachers also feel that it gets very long to get promoted. And the other interesting thing is here. So basically, the second topmost reason of dissatisfaction, 15% of the teachers would actually feel that the promotion in the system in Beijing is like too competitive, so that's why they would feel like very stressful about the system. Yeah. And then now I move on to study some kind of within case variations. So the most prominent within case variation that I found is the divide between the guest teacher and the regular teacher. So you can see that actually like guest teachers are lagging behind in all these kind of supportive accountability measures that I have. So that's why I also tested the difference between the support received by the regular teachers versus the support received by the regular teachers. And you see like on all dimensions, the lagging behind is like very statistically significant. So, but in Beijing, because all the teachers are like regular teachers in the system, so that's why we didn't see like a lot of substantial differences. So whether teaching middle school or teaching high school, or whether the years of government school experience is below the average or above the average. So basically, there's no substantial difference in these subgroups. And I also tested, I also ran some statistical tests on that, and I didn't find any kind of significant results either. So in Beijing, I can see like the system is like more balanced in terms of the support that they get. So I think the takeaway of this kind of comparison is, to begin with, that supportive accountability actually matters, because as you can see from the comparison, systematically excluding some actors from receiving the support would have like very negative impact on their perceptions of the system, and it would increase their levels of dissatisfaction. And the second and third takeaway is that given that the supportive accountability is there, like say the in-service training for regular teachers in Delhi and also in-service training and career development for teachers in Beijing, in order for them to be successful, it has to match the needs and incentives of the recipients. Because it is ultimately like when they receive this kind of support, and then they will be able to drive the change within the education system. And then finally is that for this kind of supportive mechanisms to be successful, they also need to really like advance the professional capacity of those recipients. So that's why if you have a promotion system that is disconnected with the teaching excellence, so that's why not only will teachers have a lot of complaints and dissatisfactions over the promotion system, but it will also be like very negatively impacting like how these teachers can have a role in driving the improvements of student outcomes. And in addition to surveying the in-service training and the career advancement, I also put them in a larger picture as situating them with other kind of accountability mechanisms, such as vouchers and privatization, also the parental involvement and the autonomy decentralization. Voucher is basically given to parents so that they can choose, so it's like a subsidy, so that they can go to the private schools. So actually, currently in Beijing and Delhi, they don't have the voucher system, even though I believe that Delhi has some kind of pilot on the voucher system back in 2007 maybe. So that's why even though we see increasing privatization in both Beijing and Delhi, but it's good for the expansion of access, but it's doubtful whether it can improve quality, because if the competition and choices, let's say even though the private school performance is substantially better than the government school, which is actually not the case for Delhi, as the government schools actually performs better. But the thing is that if the good practices from the private schools doesn't get diffused to the government schools, then it's actually enlarging the gap, because it's only the rich people that can afford to go to the private schools. Versus in a government system, at least theoretically, it is possible for the government to ask the schools to diffuse those kind of good practices to other schools. That is not happening in Delhi, but it is somehow happening in Beijing in a very preliminary cases.
So for example, in Delhi, you have this kind of RPVB schools whose performance is like generally better than the normal schools. But there's no good practice diffusion, like the DOE doesn't ask them to do that, and these RPVB schools doesn't have incentive to do that either. But in Beijing, there is this practice called groups or clusters. So it's an intermediate level in between the district and the school level. So it's a very recent practice, and it's a very loosely coupling practice also. So basically, the group is composed of both the good performing schools and also the average and below average schools, right? So what they do is that the good performing schools will make this kind of announcement. So these are the in-service training going on in school. These are the extracurricular activities going on in school. So that's why the schools within a group are more than welcome to join. So it's not compulsory, but at least the mechanism is there.
And similarly, I surveyed the parental involvement, autonomy, etc. So I think the takeaway point for this part of accountability in context is that instead of relying on any single measures, but different accountability mechanisms should be installed instead, in the sense that let them complement each other or synergize each other, other than okay, I have this mechanism and I don't need anything else. So it's not like that. And so basically, I was originally expecting if some teachers can attend these sessions as well. So basically, these kind of discussed questions is because this survey is conducted 2 years back, right? So given a lot of things going on, so I'm actually this time I'm very interested to know that what are the changes that has been experienced in the system in terms of how the in-service training is structured, organized, how the career advancement system is structured, and how does the perceptions of teachers on supportive accountability changes. So that's why even though I'm just here for a very short period, but I would love to interact with teachers, and I actually just came back from a school visit. So these are the updates that I want to follow up also. Yeah, that's it, and I look forward to receiving your comments and suggestions, questions.
Thank you very much. That was really comprehensive and in-depth research that you have done based mainly on fieldwork on this issue of in-service training and career advancement of teachers in Beijing. Now, yes, we open the floor for discussion, but I have just one point to make. In Delhi, in the government schools, mostly kids who study there are sometimes the first generation learners. The parents are either illiterate or semi-literate. That is not the case in Beijing. So, doesn't that, is it not a factor that needs to be understood? You don't have to answer right now. But this is something that, while I was going through this, it's actually a contrast basically between Beijing and Delhi. You saw this situation of the North Delhi schools and schools in Beijing. I have myself been to some schools in Beijing when I was doing some work on competition. I know I was taken to the best schools, but I was simply stunned by the infrastructure, the cleanliness, and everything else.
So actually, I think your point is relevant to the things here, the parental involvement. So that's not, but that I would say that it's actually a problem both for, Beijing certainly did better, but it's still an ongoing problem. So basically, in the teacher survey, I asked what kind of trainings you receive, who are the organizers, etc. for different types of trainings. So there's the subject or academic content-based training, the trainings on teaching skills, pedagogy, and then trainings on maybe student management, classroom management, and the trainings on how to interact with parents, how to get parents involved, those kind of parental involvement, and other miscellaneous categories. So I think in both Beijing and Delhi, despite their different perceptions and satisfaction levels, they are most satisfied
with the trainings on the academic content and the teaching pedagogies and skills. So these are the trainings that are relatively established, advanced, etc. So teachers in Delhi are actually like more dissatisfied with the trainings on like the student and the classroom management and also parental involvement. So one of the things that I mentioned is that given our situation that a lot of the parents are illiterate, like the teachers being the children being the first generation learners, like how to better engage this kind of parents. So the training in this aspect is almost vacant. Versus in Beijing, like the trainings on this aspect is also lagging behind. But given the what is called the teacher-parental meetings, like it's more frequent and it has longer years of establishment in Beijing. So I would say Beijing is like relatively better in this sense versus like say for the mega PTM. It's just like very recent thing. I think the first mega PTM is in October 2016. So you see like barely 2 or 3 years have passed, right?
In Delhi.
In Delhi, yeah. So the last mega PTM I think is in January. So this is the first difference that I've observed in terms of the parents. And the second thing, the second difference is reflected here as the tools of communication. So basically in the survey I also asked what are the topmost methods of communication with parents. So basically in Beijing, because they are not the first generation learners, and also nowadays WeChat is like very frequently used. So actually the WeChat and the social media is one of the top 3 methods of communication between teachers and parents. So there are good things and bad things. The good thing is that it's almost like an instant feedback. So like each and every day, like what is the assignments and whether your kids has fulfilled it on time. So it's like a very frequent back and forth. But the complaints of the parents is that it's sometimes too frequent. So that's why like they would think like it's a harassment to receive like almost on a daily basis. But at least the technology is there, so it's possible like maybe to parents to opt in advance whether you want to receive daily update or weekly update. So that's why like you can still leverage the technology like towards the better usage. Versus here, like in Delhi, the topmost communication method is still like through the student diary and maybe like once per semester through the like parents teacher meetings through the report. And nowadays I realized that now so the Delhi government recently have this like a mass SMS, like mass communication with parents. But given that it's like organized by the DOE, so it's still like very generalized information. It's not like very in-depth specific information in this regard.
Okay. But it's excellent research from that. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, yours is one of the best presentation so far I have ever attended. And now, if you are asked by your government to bring one syllabus, which is applicable to both Delhi school and Beijing school, what would be the particular subject?
I wouldn't think that it's kind of beyond the scope of the research, because so for here I think also another related question that I got asked is like I think I won't be asked this question here because you know the importance of doing comparative research is about India and China. But like when people ask me like why do I like compare Beijing and Delhi, it's so different. It's kind of incomparable. It's like apples and oranges like that. So like the one thing that I want to clarify is that it also depends on what is the purpose of like this kind of comparison. So by making this kind of comparison, I'm not trying to make a judgment on any like government initiatives. I'm also not trying to make a ranking of like, okay, Beijing is doing better and Delhi is doing worse, or because otherwise I would have relied on some kind of like say student level test scores. But student level test scores is like entirely incomparable in any parts of India and China because like this test system is different. So that's why the purpose of my comparison is, as I said, it's really like an exploratory study. So that's why I simply just want to explore what are the practices on the ground, given that they are both the largest basic education system that's in the world, right? And maybe through the comparison, some kind of lessons can be cross-learned and some kind of lessons can be diffused to other context-based similar challenges also. So that's the rationale behind this comparison. But having said so, I think if to be honest, it's only when I started to do the field work that I realized that the textbook is actually also like a very ideological and political thing. So to be honest, I don't think any kind of textbook will be launched as per your imagination, given the current government. But if there's any kind of textbook that can be launched, I think it's more just promoting the current development of both countries, but in a more balanced manner. Because let's say in the textbooks of the maybe PGT of the political science, senior secondary level, so they were still saying that the Chinese economy is like a closed economy, so China has a lot of so it's like a very outdated image, right?
Even now it's like that?
Even now it's like that. So that's why 2 years back when I went to the school and then one kid got in touch with me, and originally I was quite excited because I think okay, the kids at that level, he is interested in how to make better classroom management, and then when we actually talk up, it's all these kind of old stereotypes, is China like this, is China like that. So if there can be anything an updated version about what China really looks like today, and the same thing happens to China also. These stereotypes about India, being backward, a lot of bad things going on. I mean, to a certain extent, this is true. But this is there's still an elephant in the room that neither party refused to see. You see what I mean?
So, Namaskar, I am Yifei from James Rohini Secretary. My question is that how we can introduce human resource accounting to understand the competency of the teacher, and how the computerized accounting, human resource accounting will help this problem of Beijing as well as in India. Because and even their study, even their ideology, perception towards the student is also very different. How we can address all these issues?
I think your question actually resonates with the key message that I want to have here, because one of the messages that I want to give is that okay, it's okay that because even though you can see that here I'm very critical about Delhi government's initiative, but it's despite all these things that they have done, they're actually doing quite a lot of work already. Right? So basically that's why it's even more important to get the governance aspect right? Now coming back to your question about the human resource accounting, it's actually just trying to make the support. I mean, support is nice. It's nice to have support there, right? But in order for the support to be effective, you also need to make the support more linked to the needs of the teachers. So basically, one thing that can be done is just to ask the teachers at the ground level, what are they actually what are the difficulties in terms of training, and then what are your best practices that is utilized in your training, for example. So this kind of, because the teachers having taught so many years in a certain subject and with a certain levels of kids, they do have a lot of expertise already. So what the government needs to do, which also substantially reduce the burden of the government and synergize the different levels of effort actually, is just to, instead of treat the teachers as a burden, you have to train them, you have to as a subject to be managed, but they are really the resource of the system. So that's why like you differentiate so basically those teachers who get a PhD there's a TGT in Hindi who got like a PhD degree like very advanced level. So whether these kind of teachers can be asked to share their lessons, their good practices with other teachers, versus also like the teacher who has taught the TGT chemistry for like 10 plus years. So instead of promoting him into the PGT level, is it possible to like recruit him as a teacher trainer so that he can share his experience within the like system level? So these are the things that the government can explore in order to like to do things better. Let's say.
So another question is that even in India there is IMA is there, All India Management Association, which is a consortium of all managers. So if we can make the consortium of all teachers in India and they can share their experience, do some conference and do something that what are the things that needed, what things we should address to the government, what things such type of things is rightly required or not.
I think it is absolutely required, and it's also actually happening on the ground. So last time when I was here, I was actually invited to, it's not even an NGO, so basically it's just a bunch of teachers and they gather together and they discuss their like problems and frustrations and also maybe to some extent solutions, I think on a weekly basis. So there is like on the ground level initiatives. But what the government should do, like I feel like it's inadequately done, is that instead of being blind to this kind of local level initiatives, give them some kind of reward recognitions so that this kind of on the ground initiatives can grow, right? They can be replicated. So like once teachers from other districts see, okay, this group of teachers, like they have this kind of excellent discussions, like their own bottom-up initiatives, and it's kind of encouraged by the government, then they will be encouraged also to like maybe launch their own initiatives, right? So these are some things that the government can give, right?
Anybody else? You, yeah.
A couple of things. So one of the things that seems to come out from so let me just step back and ask you to elaborate a little bit on Beijing itself. So in terms of when you say financial decentralization in Beijing, what level of autonomy and budgets do principals have as compared to what they have in Delhi vis-a-vis, when you're looking at district levels kind of structures? And also in terms of pedagogy and the structures that you see in the system, to what extent do you see the methods of teaching being used, let's say, teaching aids like computer-aided learning structures and things of that sort? Because I see a lot of one of the big differences that you showed was the relatively short class hours of teachers in Beijing, vis-a-vis like 20 plus hours of teaching in Delhi. And what difference does that make in pedagogy in some sense? And third, in terms of internal evaluations, so one of the big changes that is Delhi government is now trying to do is to try and look at learning outcomes at different levels to try and understand what people are doing. But is there, otherwise previously it was basically the exams within schools, etc. So is there, when you're evaluating schools, when you're thinking about promotions, is there any sort of performance of students, etc., that is used in the Beijing system vis-a-vis here? Any differences that you see in that kind of structure?
Thanks a lot for the question. I think there are three questions there.
And I'm very appreciative of this question because it allows me to elaborate on the things that I didn't cover in detail. So first of all, the level of decentralization, I was lucky enough because I launched the 31 principal survey in Delhi and also 8 principal surveys in Beijing. So according to the principal survey, I would say that the Beijing system is kind of quite top-down control also. But at least one substantial difference is that in terms of fiscal decentralization, you're asking. At least 90% of the budget that the principals have in Delhi is from the state level. So it's a DOE money, right? So a very tiny portion maybe it's from the district level. Versus that in Beijing, a substantial amount of the money is given by the district authorities. So the level of the decentralization, I would say that in Delhi, basically there's no level of decentralization. Everything is concentrated at the state level. In terms of Beijing, the decentralization is at least one level down at the state level, at the district level. In terms of the pedagogy and teaching hours, unfortunately, I don't think the situation is going to change, even though it's 2 years already. So basically, I was visiting another school yesterday. So basically, I asked them to do again the same questionnaire, just to see how things have changed after 2 years. So originally, the teacher filled just 2 hours and 1 hour of administrative matters outside the teaching. But when I followed up, because last time when I was here, the reason why the administrative hours can be substantially higher is because that's also the MCD election time. So that's why I was asking, okay, now within a few months, the general election is gonna come out. Also, is it gonna be affecting your teaching or whatever? It's the same. So basically, teachers as civil servants, they will be required to fulfill what is called the election duties, which sometimes can really compromise the entire day of teaching, right? And in terms of the pedagogy you mentioned, that's another observation that I made, which is the dissertation itself. So basically, the office in Delhi is like a large office in which each and every teacher, basically all the teachers are sitting within one office, right? And there's no computer there. There's no
common room. Just common room.
In a teacher's office. So basically, that's the one
room.
Yeah, that's one and the only place where they mark the results and do everything. So there's no single computers there. Versus the offices in Beijing, there are different practices. So there are general office rooms also, but the most common practice is that there would be either the grade-based office or the subject-based. So either maybe Chinese teachers of all the grades are within one office, or maybe all the teachers of grade 7 and 8 are in one room. So there's more specialization in that case. And the other thing is that computer, it's each and every teacher in Beijing, they would just it's an office computer. And in addition to this office computer, they frequently use laptops and this kind of technological aids. So that's why I visited an RPBB school today, which is considered very advanced already, right? So in a classroom, I don't think in the classroom itself, I don't see any kind of technological aids. But at least in the biology lab that I visited, so the lab is very advanced in terms of all the facilities. The evaluations. So there are good and bad updates from the system, according to these 2 years. The good thing is that previously, the AAP government came around 2015, right? So they had an emphasis on quality ever since the beginning. But you know, like how quality is measured in the school level. So basically, it's the passing rate of the CBSE exam. And the passing rate, I don't know, like it's not even 16 marks, like maybe 50 marks, and then you're considered 40. So they only measure the percentage rate or a percentage of passing CBSE exam. So nowadays, which I heard is like a kind of experience of 6 or 7 years already, but I think it's more taken, more internalized in the RPBBs. So nowadays, in addition to the passing rate, they also measure what is called the quality index, which is essentially the CGPA, like cumulative GPA, so it's like also the scores. So they measure this as a quality, and there are inter-RPBB comparisons of these scores. And if certain RPBB is winners on both the quantitative and the qualitative aspects, it will get like certificate of appreciation or something like that. But there's no financial incentives involved. And also, say if a teacher performs really well here, so far there's no linkage with the promotion system either. And that is quite different in Beijing. I mean, in Beijing, it's a tricky thing in the sense that on the one hand, they told me that they are very satisfied that at least the promotion criteria is transparent. But one thing that they feel quite still very dissatisfied is that, okay, the transparency of criteria is there. But given that maybe the design of the criteria is not very good, so that's why there are a lot of candidates who match the criteria already. But who got selected after that, it's not very transparent. So that's their kind of concerns. But at least I would say that the connection between performance and promotion in Beijing is more closely connected as compared to Beijing, as compared to Delhi, which is a zero connection.
So if I just go back to the first answer, the district provides a large part of the budget, but how much flexibility does the school principal have in terms of wants to buy some new equipment or wants to buy some new aids? Are these kinds of things, or just maybe needs to renovate, buy new chairs, something's broken down? Is that something that the principal controls the budget? That's one. And right at the beginning you mentioned about de jure and de facto differences across. So in terms of actual practices on the ground versus what is supposed to be there as per paper, what are the main differences you observe between China and India?
So in terms of the autonomy of the principal, one caveat I want to make is that I will probably not be able to answer much because originally when this research project is launched, I have the ambition to do both teacher survey and a principal survey. But given that so let's say it's a miracle that this dissertation is done. So there are a lot of difficulties because I'm serving the government middle school, right? So in the end, I got the permissions from the Delhi department, which I'm super grateful. But the thing is that I didn't get the official permission from the Beijing government. So that's why, even though the teacher survey is launched, it's launched through a very sympathetic professor who happened to have a student in the Fengtai Education Bureau in charge of teacher matters. But since she is not in charge of the principal matters, so I, despite all my connections, I only have 8 teacher surveys in Beijing. So that's why the data is lost. So that's why you see here it's entirely focused on teacher. But having said so, I don't think, according to the 8 principal surveys that I have, I don't think within the district level of budget they would have substantial autonomy. But at least the good thing is that given that the budget level is a level lower, at least the communication or interactions between the district and the schools can be more frequent. as compared to, say, between the state level authorities and the schools, right? So this is one thing. And the other thing why I don't think this the autonomy issue like matter that much as compared to Delhi is that in Beijing the education resources are relatively abundant. So that's why I would say that not only is the infrastructure like very adequate, there might even be a level of over-infrastructurized actually, because like say the budget is there, right? So if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So that's why like you have to invest it somewhere, even though like it's already very adequate, right? So that's why like when I interacted with the experts who happen to like closely doing research in the schools, is that like the ICT infrastructure, which is already like very advanced, but still every year they will just invest in upgrading it, etc. So that may also be the reason why like we see like for each and every teacher there's a computer there and it's like all very advanced. So in terms of the de jure and de facto, I think like on the paper, like of course, these two governments are very committed to education and the quality of the education. They do want to like make student learning outcomes better, and they at least on paper they recognize the importance of teachers, right? But in terms of how this kind of supporting accountability is launched at the ground level, so we still see a kind of disconnection. So basically, okay, on the one hand, I want to give the teachers training and a promotion kind of support, but on the other hand, I don't even bother to understand like what are their difficulties, what are their needs. So this is the gap that I made between de jure and de facto.
Now, regarding the financial autonomy of principals in Delhi, to the best of my knowledge, once an amount has been sanctioned by the government to a school, the principal is fairly free to spend it. And of course, provided they're supposed to have a purchase committee or whatever, they're buying something and they have to follow GFR, government financial rules. So that is what is my understanding in Delhi schools. I'm not sure about what happens in Beijing.
Is that amount large after you have taken away the salaries?
No, it's in addition to that. Salaries are not directly paid, by the government. It comes to the, accounts of the teachers. The principal or the school authorities have no say or no role in that. The government sends it. Same as in our universities. Our department head doesn't even know whether we are getting our salaries or not. Plays no role. It comes straight from the finance section. Same thing in schools. But once a certain amount has been allocated to a school, the principal is quite free and autonomous to use it, provided those you have to then send it to the accounts department and it goes to auditing. So the usual procedure.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
it was very, very interesting presentation, especially what you mentioned about getting permissions. So some of us here, we do comparative work. But one thing, could you tell us a little bit more about this process of conducting fieldwork in all these places? Like what were the challenges you faced? What, for instance, you did surveys with teachers, right? So
That's another presentation.
maybe like a synoptic view, because you did surveys of teachers in both these schools, right? So what was that experience like? How accessible were they? How open were they to being honest with you? A little bit about that.
I'm actually very happy to share that also, so that actually there are a lot of mistakes on my own and also a lot of difficulties, so that when you actually launch your own research, you may face less hurdles. So basically I'm surveying government schools. So in addition to the permission from my university, I need to get the permission from both governments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just forget about this for a second. The first difficulty that I encountered is to get a research visa. So it's like even though the Singapore government, I guess they are very sympathetic already. It took me 3 months to get a bloody visa.
For
Yeah. And then afterwards, I think the difficulties in the two capitals or the two countries can be quite. Just maybe for the two capitals, because if you go to the
more local regions and other parts of the two countries, like maybe it's gonna be easier because like there's less administrative hurdles. But in terms of Beijing and Delhi, it's just so the difficulties are quite different. So in Delhi, it's not about the problem of access because of like this like open media like so I think during my second week here, I got connected to Atishi, and then Atishi is quite open, like to sharing about the problems, etc. Yeah. So that's why like I got a very good interview with her already. But the thing is that even though I got connected to her, she cannot walk me through the like the permission application process, right? Because it's such a messy system, like nobody's knowing like what's going on inside. So in the end, I was like very lucky. It's also the resource from my university. So basically, they have this Master of Public Management program. A lot of Indian and Chinese officials like went there to study. So one IRS official is very sympathetic about my research.
You have to know bureaucrat to be.
Yeah, and then somehow he got. So that's why like I was joking that he is literally the guy who saved the dissertation, because otherwise I won't be able to. But on the other hand, it's like once you get the permission. Oh, by the way, the permission takes 3 months. Take another like 3 months. But once you get the permission, then I guess on the principals and the teachers will just receive you, and sometimes they answer like very frankly also. So this is the hurdle in Delhi. Versus in Beijing, I somehow feel that it's not even an open system. The system itself is closed. And unless you know the very top level officials, which unfortunately our alumni is not at that level yet. So without knowing that kind of top-notch persons, the system is not open to you. So that's why I was also that lady is the lady who saved my dissertation on the Beijing side. So it's only very lucky that she happens to be the student of this university professor, and somehow she was able to like get the questionnaires through like on an informal sense. And the other mistake that I made is actually that because I was thinking that, of course in Delhi, it's nowhere possible that you can send the questionnaires online. Right? So that's why I physically visited the 33 schools and physically filled out all the questionnaires. But somehow I was thinking that maybe I need to reach a kind of parity between the two instruments. So that's why like originally like in Beijing I was doing the same, like I physically went there and delivered the questionnaire. But the thing is that in Beijing or maybe in China in general, like the ICT facilities are already much better. So that's why in the end I just emailed my questionnaire like to the lady, and the lady helped me disseminate. And then because they give me the like WeChat number and the cell phone number of each and everyone. So that's why in the end even though I'm physically in Singapore, so I just follow up with them on WeChat. So it made things easier. So that is like a very briefly the research experience.
That's been tough, I can understand.
Leslie,
Wait a minute, is there anybody else?
Yeah, I do have.
Let's one round be over, then you can ask.
Yeah, thank you. Fascinating question. So my question is with regard to, like, in both in India and China, when we look into these two capital cities, you also have a lot of these tuition bureaus.
Coaching classes.
Coaching classes. In China, you have the
Coaching classes.
private
Yeah.
institutions. So I want to say, like, how is the role of government teachers? Because in Beijing, you showed that a lot of schools are very less teaching hours. So what do they do? They do like. Are they making money outside the system? Like,
Are they allowed to?
10 years back, they did.
and yeah, I can follow
so maybe I
later.
clarify this first. So 10 years back they did, and it is totally unregulated. So it's like a huge money indeed. But I guess like maybe around 10 years back, the government actually banned that.
Yeah.
So that's why like if you're a government school teacher, you are not allowed to have this kind of practice outside. In Delhi, I don't know if there's a regulation per se, But 2 years back, when I interviewed some teachers, I see that there are actually practices like that.
Especially maths, commerce, economics, teachers, physics, science.
Yeah.
We all do.
But
practice.
I would interpret this as a lack of the support within the system, financial-wise and also recognition-wise. Like after teaching 10 years, the reason why they can make money outside of outside the system, the coaching, is because they have the experience and their experience works, right? The students get good results, and then that's why they came back, right? But somehow this kind of expertise is nowhere recognized through the promotion system, right? So that's why what they do, that's the kind of only coping mechanism.
Yeah, the second question is with regard, again in comparing Indian system, you have a lot of teachers going actually promoting, getting promotion vertically, like becoming vice principal. But at the same time, we see especially when I come from Sikkim, and we see a lot of good teachers they're being trained as teachers, but later on they go into different departments like food and civil supplies department. They get recruited into that, like horizontal promotions. But as you said, again in Beijing, you have that horizontal as well as vertical promotion system. So when you say horizontal, promotions, what do you mean? Are they going to different departments or within the same, education or school system?
No, so we can go back to the two charts. So this is what I mean by vertical and horizontal. So basically, so basically the vertical just simply means from to use the acronym. So basically it simply means from PRT to TDT and then PDT, right? This is the promotion system here. And versus outside of this teaching career, then you may be promoted to vice principal, you may be promoted to teacher trainer, right? So the horizontal system in Delhi, in Beijing, it means that let's say you teach at a secondary level. Promotion doesn't require you to go either one level up or you stay at the level, but you're promoted from level 3 to level 2 to level 1. So this is a recognition.
Grades within the same.
Within the same. Within the same portion. Yeah. And then so this is what I mean by horizontal. And the other, so the horizontal versus vertical is more relevant to the teaching career, right? The other difference is in Delhi you can say that it's a flat system. In the sense that in between teachers and then the leadership, vice principal, there are rarely connections in between, right? But the system in Beijing is more rich and nuanced in the sense that in between the vice principals and the teachers, you also have this kind of intermediate leadership.
In Delhi, they also become administrators. Renu Sharma, for instance, was a teacher. Then she became vice principal, then regional director. The person came for a conference. So they get administrative positions also. And they prefer that because there is more better salary and maybe more stability.
So another things that updates that I can share from whatever 2 days that I have learned is that recently, not recently, so 2 years back, they launched this called mentor teachers. There's 3 levels. Mentor teachers, learning coordinators, and then teacher development coordinators. So I mean, the rationale behind all this kind of it's not even a position. So I'll just explain it. So basically, the reason why they installed all this is, I guess, to make the training more catering to the local needs, right? So the rationale is good, but the way they did it, so mentor teacher is a full-time position, which means that you have to, you don't have any teaching burdens anymore. For the entire year, you don't teach, but you are just exclusively as a mentor teachers. And then you go to schools to discuss with the teachers, what are your problems. So basically, 2 aspects. So that's why, sometimes they mention that, the mentor teachers are not exactly the best teachers with good practice. But and also it's on an application basis, which means that I want to be a mentor teacher, and then I applied it, and then maybe you will get approved or like that. So basically, the other groups of teachers will be like, I don't like teaching exactly. So mentor teacher is like a way for me to escape, right? So that's why they don't necessarily select the best teachers or the most suitable teachers for the mentor teacher position. And then for the teacher learning, so the teacher learning coordinators is still based at the school and still has teaching workload, even though the workload is reduced a bit. But then the biggest problem as the current version is that they are not separate categories and also no extra financial incentives either. So that's why sometimes it just becomes an extra burden. Because as a teaching learning coordinator, you have extra stuff to do, to discuss with teachers, but none of them get recognized in the system, and it's nowhere related to your future promotion either. So that's why there are still substantial scope to improve, for the recent developments they have.
Yeah.
Just one is a simple question. Where were you educated? Number two, the system of curriculum, school, textbooks, etc. Beijing to Dhaka. Is it compulsory or optional for a Tibetan student to learn Chinese and vice versa? And that system prevails around the world, including Dharamsala or not?
Okay. Thank you for the questions. So I think, as you can read from my bio, so my undergrad was in Shanghai, and then I did a master in Mumbai, and then the PhD in Singapore. So regarding so that the second question exactly resonates with my point that the textbook curriculum is a political thing, even though it's kind of not very well recognized. So previously, in China or in Beijing, the curriculum is 3 levels. So basically, you have the national compulsory curriculum, and then you have the city-wise or local-wise ones, and then finally you have the school-level curriculums. But recently, I think, and also even for the national curriculum, the practice used to be the case that different regions can have different textbooks, right? But then somehow this scenario changed maybe 2 or 3 years back. I think 2 years back maybe. So the MOE actually nationalized the textbook provision for all the political science, or ideology, this kind of subjects. So that's why you can say that it's actually a re-centralization of the textbooks. So that's why it's launched everywhere. And to what extent the Tibetan or anywhere in China can have their local curriculum, I'm not very sure.
Local languages are encouraged from grade 1 to grade 5 in primary level. In the autonomous regions, you can have your education in the local language. After grade 6 onwards, you have to learn Mandarin. If you don't learn Mandarin, you don't get a job in
That's true. But I think even this might be quite a local thing. If I remember, my education in Shanghai, right? So previously, there's just this kind of even if you hear about the broadcasting, it's the Mandarins and English, right? But nowadays, more and more broadcasting and learning media, they are trying to do the Shanghainese, the vernacular version also. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Then I have the last question. At what level does the party committee exist? Because we know that in China everywhere there is a party committee. So is it at the school level or the district level, or or how does it function? If you are having
Party committee is at the school level, so that's why one of the training categories.
every school has its own party committee.
Every school, as long as it's more than 3 people, they will have it.
Yeah.
So one training that is very specific in the Chinese case that I wasn't able to ask in the questionnaire is that there is this kind of national like world affairs and national development and these kind of things. And because through the expert consultation, government official interviews based upon competency and training also. So that's why the party whatever conferences that they have would be counted as that. And I think the other area where the party membership might factor in is actually through within the promotion system. Even though it's not explicitly said that party member benefits or whatever, but just imagine a lot of candidates has passed the threshold, right? So they're not really sure who gets promoted or what. So party membership might be one factors within it, alongside other factors such as whether you are you're in the intermediate leadership positions, whether you hold a lot of activities within the school. But the thing is that if you hold intermediate positions, if you organize a lot of activities within a school, then there are very high chances that you'll be recruiting this.
Within the party committee, what are people who belong to the school are members, or some outsiders are also there, like somebody from the district or something like that? Or they're just
No, it's
all within the school.
all within the school.
Okay, now suppose the chair of the party committee, is not the principal of the school. Isn't there a tussle with?
Usually it's the same.
It's the same. The principal is
The
the
principal is. Yeah, so this is quite different from the school management committee in Delhi, which requires an outside.
Yeah, correct. Lots of outside. School management, I think more than 50% at least in private schools. I am a member of a school management committee, it's a private school. And I see most of the people are, barring 2 or 3 people, everybody is an outsider.
Yeah, so in the government school, I think as per,
Outsider but friends of the principal.
yeah. So I think for the government school wise, in terms of the regulation, it is required that they would have the NGO members, local MLA, and several other people.
MLA of that region.
Of that district.
Okay, thank you very much. I think
Thank you so
it's a very
much.
fascinating dissertation. Think of publishing it, and if you can, send an article to China Report.
Oh, definitely.